And hey guys, we are live here with my buddy Arthur McFarlane. And are you tripped out yet by the reverse?
Man, not kind of. It's like, see, yeah, all right, yeah.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah,
it's like, good. Yeah, I kind of got used to it a little. Lexi is over there barking. Arthur McFarlane here. I was looking back at my Bono stuff here, podcast and video show, whatever this is, on YouTube, and again, I just like to have good conversations with good people. And I was looking back at it. Ironically, I don't know. We were just talking about how we know each other, Brooklyn Technical High School, and I think you're like at least the 10th guest I've had out of 47. I think you're number 47 guests, and I think at least 10 Brooklyn Tech people. I got to double check the math. But anyway, we were talking about racism in America. You know, very light topic to start it all off. And yeah, and we're drinking some Negronis. Cheers again, my friend. And we are here in Colorado. And yeah, I moved here a few weeks ago. I hadn't seen this guy. He's been super busy. So I said, hey, why don't we just jump on, have an excuse to hang out, come see the crib, hang out with the wifey, the doggy, and here we are. So, and also we were on our Brooklyn Tech football monthly catch up. We're kind of a men's group, if you will, pseudo. However you talk about that. I've talked about a few men's groups on a few episodes. I have another guest coming up next month in May, which is right around the corner, Dan Doty, talking about some different concepts around men's groups and what he's done in the evolution of that. Yeah, so we were on, and Arthur was kind of catching us up on some of the stuff he has going on. So, you know, I want to dive into it. And one of the things that really stood out for me was you're talking about some film projects you have coming up.
Yeah.
And you mentioned in the vein of the Watchmen series, and Lovecraft Country. I haven't seen Lovecraft Country, but Watchmen I was a huge fan of. And the Tulsa, what was the
Tulsa Massacre?
The Tulsa Massacre, yes, I didn't want to mess it up. For those not familiar, if you haven't seen it, if you're not familiar with it, and it is one of those things that until that came up, like I was not ever taught that. So it's one of those things that, you know, you might have seen some of the videos from the Martin Luther King days, and you know, hoses and dogs and things like that with the police. But this 1912 thing is a pretty significant part of history where, again, people start talking about, and I don't want to do this any injustice, so I'm going to say my part. I'm going to let Arthur educate us on the majority stuff. His project was another one of these kind of moments that, again, does not get talked about or taught in American society, school, whatever. But again, they did such a great job of the Tulsa Massacre, you know, of highlighting it and, again, bringing it to people's attention that definitely excited to see where you go with it. But yeah, so tell us your project, where you're coming from.
Well, the project is still pretty much in its infancy, if you will. But basically, I wanted to take a pretty pop culture reference and tie it into how it affects us racially. Like, for instance, when we talk about hunger and famine in other parts of the world, I would love to tie that in and how that correlates to the educational disparities that we have in the inner city, in communities that are majority people of color, and how much of a disparity and a disadvantage they end up in because of the color of their skin or where they live and who they are perceived to be. And to actually bring in that level of desperation in education that correlates to, say, hunger or extreme poverty. Because, you know, we do live in America. It is true. But unfortunately, not all things are equal in America. And I'm sure, Bobo, you and your crowd, you're well aware of this.
You guys might not know me as Bobo. That was my high school nickname. I got to college. They said, we're just going to cut that in half. You're now just Bo. I got my doctorate, so I'm Dr. Bo. It's not my real name, for anyone wondering. But anyway, you can call me Bobo. It's fine.
Sorry,
That's
Dr.
okay.
Bo. Sorry, Dr. Bo.
That's okay.
Hey,
Be Dr. Bobo. It's fine.
Years and years of conditioning. We just did this all the time.
I still have friends from junior high school who never even knew me as Bobo, so they know me by my government name. And we dare not say it.
No, we can't.
No.
Sure.
I mean, you can, but like I won't be happy about it.
Okay. No, we don't.
We're gonna have fisticuffs.
We don't want Dr. Bobo. Dr. Bo. Angry and upset. So we'll just keep.
You wouldn't
Dr.
like me when I'm angry.
He's wearing green right now. Yeah, he's actually wearing green. And so that's kind of the style I wanted to go in, and even considering how connected leadership is in the Black community from generation to generation, to understand that Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass were in the same generation, and then you fast forward and you think about Marcus Garvey, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Booker T. Washington, all in that same generation, and they were still alive when Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King were starting to gain traction in the civil rights movement. To see that kind of connection, that kind of way that Black civil rights had began to intertwine in of itself. Would love to explore that as well, and to really dig it a little deeper into how the Black community traveled in time through the American experience. Now, Lovecraft Country, the Watchmen have done an excellent job in tying racial tension with science fiction, comic book heroes, Watchmen, and horror, which is Lovecraft Country. And what was interesting, I brought this up in our men's group with our football team, and I don't know if you are aware of this, what a sundown town.
Right. That was what you started talking about. I was like, oh, like, and again, I'm aware of my ignorance. And so again, when like I learn about the Tulsa Massacre and now the sundown, which again, I guess, I think I'd heard of different versions of that in terms of like Green Book kind of felt like it touched on that.
Yeah.
For those who haven't seen Green Book, did it win the Best Picture a few years ago?
Yeah, Best Picture, Best Writer, one of those two. Yeah, absolutely.
And I've heard criticisms on both sides of it, like kind of over glorified or whatever, or it didn't tell the story quite that great. But I think they found maybe a happy medium of kind of Hollywoodizing it, if you will.
Right.
But yeah, that seemed to be the kind of thing. Like he was traveling, all over the place, and I think some of the criticism was Viggo Mortensen's guy was Italian, and they kind of let him get away with all these kind of terms and things like that. So anyway, but yeah, at the end of the day, the sundown thing seemed to be there. And again, the concept of a Green Book of like, it's safe to go this place, that place, this place,
right.
Avoid Tuscaloosa, or what, I don't know. I don't know if that was one of the places. I'm just guessing, pulling that name out of
nowhere,
out of somewhere. But but yeah, I mean, again, and yeah. So tell us more about the sundown. I mean, you can clarify.
So I love this because Lovecraft Country kind of dove into it a little bit deeper, and they spent an entire episode of the main characters going on a road trip, because one of the main characters, the uncle, is actually one of the publishers and editors of the Green Book. And so, of course, it's a fictional character. It's not based on, it's not a real character, but it is based on how they created the Green Book. Brave soul would go out and travel to these different parts of towns and literally get a feel in person to figure out, is this a good town for us based on how they treat me? And sure enough, they got into a town, and by no means was it a town that was meant for them. And basically, they got ran out of that particular town and right into another. And it was there that a sheriff, and again, this ties into one of the things that we're dealing with now between, police brutality, people of color, Black Lives Matter, and things like that. And of course, a sheriff comes in and says, "Hey, what are you doing on the side of the road?" Oh, we had, and they had a legitimate reason to stop. They were trying to, look at their map. Now they had a whole map, physical map, and they needed to get their bearings and figure out what road marker was doing what. They didn't have a phone, there was no GPS, nothing like that. They had to read. And the sheriff said, "Hey, listen, you have until 7 o'clock to be out
of
beyond,
our town.
yeah, out of the city limits, or we will kill you. We will kill you dead." And that was the horror of it. And he said, "Don't let me pull you over for anything." And so basically, they had to drive as perfectly as they could because, of course, the sheriff was behind them, waiting for them to mess up, and they had to get out of town before sunset because there are still, as a matter of fact, I think I was listening to NPR, and there are still some towns to this day that have the signs up that say N-word, be out of town by sundown. And they're not, of course, the billboard is not going to describe exactly what will happen to you, but we are talking about the 1930s, 40s, and 50s.
Sorry, Lexi is she seems to really like Arthur, so if she jumps up on him. All right. Yeah.
So that is Sundown Town, and it in Lovecraft Country, they tied a particular horror movie trope to that.
I think we can say spoiler alerts if you want to.
Yeah, it's a spoiler alert because I didn't want to. I wanted somebody to go and see it, but basically they're tying vampires that live at night with the Sundown Town, and so it's kind of that trippy thing, but it's done very, very well. It was nominated for a few awards as well. Got a lot of notoriety, and it keeps going. And it's almost an anthology. Each episode deals with a certain aspect of the racial experience in the 50s, like buying a house in the wrong neighborhood, things like that. And so I want to, now that has opened the door, I believe that this is our opportunity to explore that even further and even look into different angles and other experiences that people of color, and it doesn't always have to be, African American. We can talk about the immigrant experience. We can talk about Hispanic and Latino Americans.
Let's not forget Asians with all the
Asians right now.
Recent stuff
what's going on? They have a deep history. Let's not talk about Chinese immigrants during what was it, the 1800s, when they were building the railroads and the railways from East Coast to West Coast, and how involved they were in that, dispelling the myths of the Wild West. I think that's a very important story to tell. I don't know if you know this, but cowboys weren't white.
Yeah.
That's hard to explain. That's hard to fathom, seeing that all of our John Waynes and Clint Eastwoods were the stars of our Western movies, but that wasn't the Wild West. And so, matter of fact, the Wild West was way more progressive than Hollywood would lead you to believe.
Right.
And so,
but that wasn't something for the 1950s audience to.
Not at all.
or even 60s, or even 70s, or even 80s.
Yeah.
We can maybe 90s, maybe.
Not even 90s.
No, not even really today. We could say, So yeah, it's super interesting stuff, and again, like, I don't know, I want to go down the political side of it and talk about the orange man that was running things for the last 4 years or whatever. And we get into it on some of our groups, and again, some guys are for him, some guys are against him, and that's the nature of things, and we're able to. I'm probably the one who gets most vocal. I'll admit to that, and then then we can, at the end of it, we're like, okay, cool, we're all still boys, and so, but I do want to talk about it of both of us being kind of, let's say, anti-Trump. I will. And one of the main reasons for me that, again, when I get into these conversations, we touched on this on one of our last calls. I won't say the guy who specifically was supporting him. I don't want to out anybody. I'm sure if you had that conversation, he'd be happy to talk about it. But and I highly doubt he's going to watch this, so that's okay. But again, we talk about economic things, financial things, understanding, Republican versus Democrat, different policies, which is its own thing. But at the end of it, I think that, this one of the memes that went around is like, we can, and again, I've heard this from people I've been very close with in the last, during that presidential term of, we can agree to disagree about this. And I said, no, we can't agree to disagree about racism. And
Right.
like, again, I hate sounding, I feel like, for those who watch my channel, like, I don't touch on these things very often, but we have to have these conversations, and that's it, and just continue to put it out there. And again, those people who try to agree to disagree with me, if you happen to be watching, again, I want to find a way to have that conversation. But yeah, we can agree to disagree about pizza toppings,
Sure.
or
Sure.
does this shirt make me look whatever?
Right.
But yeah, not racism. It's or homophobia or trans rights.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, we had some guys on that call who like didn't necessarily know a lot about trans
Right.
that we talked about last time, and a few people on there were like, hey, like, this is where that came from. Same thing when we're talking about this sundown phenomenon or
Sundown Town.
Sundown Town.
Mm-hmm.
These things and the one thing I was going to say about the Tulsa Massacre, for those who haven't seen Watchmen, who are not going to watch Watchmen, the interesting thing there is, again, that was historically, and again, correct me, you probably have a little more knowledge about the situation than I do, but it was Black people were trying to create their own Wall Street. And again, sometimes, some of the criticisms of white America is to like, why don't you guys just go find your own place? And that's kind of what was trying to happen in 1912. 1912.
And they weren't necessarily creating their own Wall Street. It was coined the Black Wall Street simply because that particular community had so many people that were well off, wealthy business owners, things like that. It's a great term, but essentially it's just a neighborhood that became extremely affluent and self-sufficient, rich, in the sense of, when cities and the economics that go into building towns and incorporated communities. The town was very well off. They had their own airport. Some of those people were able to fly their own planes, drive their own cars, have their own businesses. What was very interesting about Tulsa, Oklahoma, and that part of Tulsa was the tale of the other side of the tracks. And the other side of the tracks, if you will, was reversed this time. So now the Black side of town was affluent, wealthy, furs, fine arts, movie theaters, music halls, the works, you name it. Anything that you can think of in a well-off community like Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills, they had it. And across the tracks where the white community had, they were poor, they were broke, they were destitute. And in those moments, and instead of coming together, if you will, it was, why can't I have what they had?
Right.
And then it became what we now know as the Tulsa Massacre.
Yeah. And again, for those who haven't seen it, please check it out. Thank you, Lexi. If you guys didn't know, that was not me just doing crazy stuff. That was the dog.
Yeah, he wasn't growling over all these hot buttons.
Yeah. Another show that I don't know if you've seen it, Fargo, the most recent season with Chris Rock.
Yeah.
I think it was in the 50s. I think it was. It wasn't in Minnesota. It was. I think it was Kansas City. It was Kansas City, and I think it was based loosely on some truth. And so Chris Rock plays they cover racial kind of wars a little bit interesting too, and they had the Italian and Irish, and then the Black community came in, and they show that. I think that's a really good one if you haven't checked it out.
I haven't.
I really enjoy. All the seasons of Fargo were really cool, but this last one really delved into that racial component. And again, Chris Rock trying to become like a legitimate. He was like mafioso, if you will, but he goes to the bank and comes up with this idea of a credit card, pretty much. And the bank's like, I don't think our people will ever do that. And of course, then they kind of steal the idea and because they didn't want to whatever. But again, I do recommend that one from a racial perspective. So yeah, the Tulsa Massacre, man, it's
Now think about this. Let's talk about how, because we a lot of times I hear about things saying to the tone of history repeating itself. Okay. Now let's go to the Capitol insurrection, this
January 6th, 2021.
January 6th of 2021, where
day that will live in infamy.
The orange guy convinced people that people of color stole the election. That was the same idea. Those black people are so wealthy because they stole what you had.
Right.
And what in terms happens? They come in and they take it back as violently as they know how.
Right.
Same exact thing. We're going to go and march into that Capitol, and we're going to demand, and we're going to intimidate, and we're going to break stuff until we get our way. And that's the same concept of, I'm going to say, entitlement, the same concept of supremacy.
White privilege.
Yep.
Go there.
It's that same idea, that same seeded idea that breeds that level of vitriol. I won't even call it hatred yet, because if you guys get a chance to watch The Watchmen, there was something very profound he said. We don't hate black people. We just want to make sure we end up on top.
Right.
That's our job.
Right.
And so that is that slight little angle that they get into, where racism is running rawshod all over the place. Eugenics, the lies and the myths about black bodies and Latinx bodies,
right,
to prove a point of superiority. It's not even about hating me.
Right.
It's about proving a superiority that isn't even there.
An interesting thing that brings up for me is, again, I kind of enjoy these movie references, if you will, and Jojo Rabbit. Did you see that one?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, so I think they did one of the better jobs of taking the child's imagination and showing how they portrayed the Jew, and they have horns coming out of their head, and all these things. And again, that's where we saw some of these things on the black minstrels, and the stereotypes, eating watermelon, and yes, I don't know if I can even do that. Yeah, yes, massa, and I'm not even going to. But and blackface in general as just a whole, and again, blackface is something that what's his name, Jimmy Kimmel did as Karl Malone,
right?
And Canadian president, or was he prime minister, president, Justin Trudeau, apparently he did stuff like that, which again is still modern day stuff.
Very sensitive, because what's tied into blackface is it's not a black actor playing the part. It's a white actor playing the part. And then the white actor is literally painting his face black and nailing every single caricature and exaggerated trait and exaggerated trope of what they think is Black America for the masses. So then when they see a real black person, then the expectation is for me with my Yankee cap on and a polo shirt on to say, yo, homie, yo, nah, I mean, yeah, you know what I'm saying? And that's because there is an insistence on perpetuating a specific personality type, attitude, or anything like that to the masses. And that's when we get into this whole thing with police brutality, this whole thing with the Karen, the Karen, because America is taught to fear black skin so much so because of what's been pushed on us. You see me and you think DMX. Rest his soul.
I do not think DMX when I see him.
Thank you. Right. Thank you.
for whatever that's.
Well, you grew up in
Well,
in
yeah, we were
Brooklyn
talking
for
about
so
that a
many
little
years, right?
bit before. And yeah, I mean, I was one of the only white guys on a predominantly black, little Hispanic, little bit Asian football team. And again, the high school that we went to, Brooklyn Tech, 5,000 kids pretty much every year. My class started with 1,200, I think 850 ended up graduating, something like that. And the racial breakdown was something like 50%, 40% Asian, maybe 20% black, 20% white, and like 20% other, like, you know, Latin and all the other fun, no disrespect to any other, West Indian. And like we would have culture, senior culture or cultural day or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think something like 150 or 160 cultures and countries were represented. You know, as they kind of like, oh, where, you know, what are you representing Ethiopia, and what are you representing, you know, Yugoslavia, and like all these different things. So super, again, and Brooklyn in general, you know, sometimes some of those things breed those lines of like, hey, you stay over there on that side of the tracks, you know, or the metaphorical tracks, or like,
Right.
that's the Polish area, that's the Italian area, that's the black area, like, versus, oh, we're forced to be in a school together.
Right.
And you know,
We have to figure out who we are.
and again, for whatever it's worth, when we were there, I mean, I'm happy to say, like, I and again, maybe I was blatantly unaware, and I'm sure there was racist stuff that happened, but like being on the football team, and again, just seeing that, other than like one of our teammates got, again, not arrested, but he got handcuffed by the police, dragged off the football field, and I had him on my podcast a few episodes ago. You know, they threw him on the ground, put him in the paddy wagon, all that stuff, because he fit the description of somebody who did commit a crime. Other than that, though, and again, is it racism? Is it not? I'm gonna try to be politically correct. But again, from what my experience, and again, you know, I had a few people try to, a few black guys try to jump me as I went through Coney Island, which, yeah, not the safest area. It is what it is.
Right.
Did not make me like come back and talk to these guys who I'm, you know, competing on the football field with, and be like, you know what, I don't like black people.
Because I would have probably got jumped in Coney Island too.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, it is what it is on that side. But yeah, again, from the high school perspective, you know, again, I think I'd heard stories of other places where people are spray painting the N-word or whatever. And again, our high school, for whatever it's worth, during that time at least, I think was relatively, I'd call it racially open and racially accepting. And it was just like, you just can't, you know, it's not like a jail thing. And again, in the lunchroom, which was huge and massive, you know, maybe you have a few cliques or whatever, but again, like, you know, we had the football table, so, you know, there's a bunch of different races. Again, like I said, I might have been one of the only white guys my year for sure, but you know, we had a few, and so it definitely was a nice, you know, just I had a few pictures I was looking at, you know, and I joke around. It's like, oh, it's the United Colors of Benetton, because I have like the Asian person, the Indian person, me, and then a black guy, whatever. So, and again, like looking back and traveling around the world, and recently living in Orange County, which is quite a bubble. Not going to go too deep into that. And again, a few people, again, I'm not looking to offend anybody, but yeah, I just, from observation, just a lack of exposure to culture. So when people are talking about these issues that are very, you know, inflammatory, if you will, and start to argue these racial things, if you're looking at it from an academic standpoint, and you just don't know, and you've never been exposed to a black person. Again, my response to some of these people, I actually spoke with a police officer who was pretty high up in Orange County, and this is as the riots were happening, protests are happening about a year ago, and you know, I pretty much got the sense he's almost never interacted with a black person.
Wow.
You know, and again, like sometimes that's just how it is. It happens that way, you know, and it might, you know, as a police officer, the only experiences he's probably had with black people in Orange County, which has a very small black population.
Right.
You know, I joked around one time, I was in the gym and I had like two black guys in the same gym. I was like, oh my God, the only two black people in Orange County are here.
Right.
Well, you know, like it was
Count the black people.
Yeah.
That's the game.
Yeah. And so, speaking to him, again, an officer who is a Trump supporter, you know, is a police officer. He was willing to listen. And again, what I said is like almost, and I said, not, I don't even know if it's almost. I think every single black person I know. And again, like if you're a black person watching who happens to know me, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But the takeaway I had was every single black person I know has been harassed by the police. Like I don't know if I've ever. And again, it's not like I speak with. Again, I don't want to be that white guy who's like I have black friends. And you know what's that? I don't even know the term. When you're like, I'm right because I know people like whatever that term is. I can't think of it. It was used all over last year as people were like trying to say they were right. And anyway, political arguments. But my point with all that was saying, yeah, like I think every black person I know has had that experience. Yeah. And you know, me saying it, I don't think still had the power. I mean, he was taken aback. He's like, really? Like, I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I don't think. And again, I know white people who've been pulled over by the police, you know, maybe late at night and whatever. Like, they had their stories. I said it to someone else who was relatively close to me, and their response was like, well, so-and-so's uncle was pulled over and harassed. And so they're talking about a white person. I'm like, okay, that's 1 to like 7 million or whatever, you know? And I'm like, that's the stuff that just drives me like, when can we have a real conversation about some of this stuff? And again, you know, you go down some of the statistical rabbit holes and like people on both sides talking points. And again, to the guy on our on our call, I'm not gonna say his name. I'm not gonna call you out. But yeah, he said he'd go on YouTube. He doesn't like mainstream media, and he would go on YouTube and try to listen to both sides. I don't know how much I believe him on that. And again, even when you're talking about both sides, the truth usually is somewhere in between. Yeah. And so, yeah, again, like I don't want to go on this whole me, you know, again as a white guy, and the other joke we make, and I'm gonna say it here, so whoever's watching, whatever, of like it's really hard to be a white guy in 2021. You know, like yeah, like it's a crazy thing to think about. But yeah, it's just and again, you know, I was trying to reach out to people like Arthur, like, hey, like, are you okay? Mm-hmm. Like, you know, is there anything? And you know, and that was one of the things that again, a lot of white people, as everyone started buying anti-fragility, or sorry, anti-racism, and things like that. And again, there's a lot of white people trying to do the right thing, who just didn't know what to do, and they might have some black friends, and things like that. And they would come out and say stuff like, you know, what can I do? And you know, again, if you're a white person watching, it's not up to one black person to tell you. You're putting a lot of pressure on them. Like they don't necessarily know what to do. So again, I'm going to throw that out there. And again, I don't know if you had that experience or I'd love to hear, you know, I'm talking way too much.
The fact of the matter is what the anti-racism part is to destroy. I mean, it's going to destroy a millennia of thought that people are different based on the color of their skin. Mm-hmm. And there are differences. Don't get me wrong. However, those differences need to be appreciated and understood and not feared, not weaponized, and not taken advantage of. It's just interesting as well. We were just looking at a little, speaking of both sides of the news, CNN just released an article about doctors trying to destroy medical myths that still exist today for black people. Like, for instance, black people have weaker lungs is a myth. Black people have thicker skin. That's a myth. Unfortunately, people still to this day believe in that these medical myths and take it as scientific and medical fact on anatomy. And then we wonder why black people don't trust doctors. It's because we're looking at our doctors believing in something that's absolutely false. And now we're like, and I'm supposed to believe that you think I have this, that, and the other? No. And so anti-racism is really destroying the things that separate us because of the lack of trust that has been developed over the years. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy at all. That's why you're hearing things like defund the police, because it's an extreme solution against again, we just talked about Lovecraft Country, against a system that was built to cage and separate a group of people from another.
And this is something that again came up recently that I wasn't fully aware of, is especially with the Derek Chauvin trial and George Floyd, I've seen a lot of people talking about the fact that the police force was originated as a way to capture slaves and runaway slaves.
Exactly.
And that was the whole beginning of policing in America. Yep. So again, those are the roots, yep. You know, and it's hard to come out of the roots. And you know, again, another interesting thing I'll share is I mentioned it on our call. I think you were still on for that, of the Oprah Winfrey had a conversation series, and I feel bad I don't remember the guy's name, but he was a linebacker for the Philadelphia Eagles, former NFL guy, and he has a popular YouTube series called The Uncomfortable Conversation, I believe is what it's called. Are you familiar with the guy? And what was it? Do you know his name?
I don't remember his name. Okay.
Sorry, guy. He's a very large human, and I hope you don't tackle me in person like that. Is it James Harrison thing? You remember that one? That commercial?
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, whatever it is. But the uncomfortable conversation, and he brings it up, is very interesting. And again, it is, let's have these uncomfortable conversations. And again, anybody coming here from my channel looking for health and fitness stuff, I appreciate it. Arthur's over here answering to his new girlfriend, because you know that's how it goes. So and that's the same across all color lines, folks. Right. We're gonna just educate you there. So anyway, but the uncomfortable conversation, again, they had a few white people asking specific questions, and there was one guy who was a self-admitted kind of racist, but he was very open-minded. He was willing to have the conversation he realized, like, as things came up, he was like, yeah, I do have these deeply held beliefs and I'm willing to challenge them, which was an interesting thing. But he kind of pushed back a little bit around systemic and all white people have it better, and white privilege and things like that. And again, the point of that was that again, I, as a white person, like, I go into a bank, that's going to be a different experience. Even if he has $1 million more than me, it's going to be a different experience just because of the color of his skin. That's not something we can change. So, you know, there's different examples of this, but then the other part of that conversation where our football player guy, he responded basically saying, again, anytime and you kind of said it earlier, but anytime you take power away from somebody who's used to having power, like, they're not going to be happy about it. So it's not, again, and again, you said that it's not necessarily that they hate black people. Right. Maybe they do. I think there's some level of, like, whatever. And again, like, it is what it is. Right. We're not going to try to mind read and whatever. But yes, I think it all comes from insecurity. It comes, you know, the whole white power thing, like, from my experience, you know, watching a bunch of the things and experiencing and having conversations and trying to be open-minded with folks and be like, oh, like, you're in the KKK. I haven't actually, you seen that one chubbier black guy who infiltrated the KKK? Yeah. That was an interesting thing. I forgot his name too. Sorry, guy.
They made a movie out of it called Black Klansman.
No, not that one. No, this is a guy, a modern guy.
Then he just passed.
A chubby guy though. He was on Joe Rogan like a year ago.
Yeah.
So I mean, he did not look that healthy. So no, you know, not fat shaming, although that's a whole different conversation. But yeah, he was heavy guy, but he would go into and have conversations with you know, guys in the KKK. But he was a black guy, like, just coming up like, hey, I want to, like, you know, talk to you. Yeah. And they were like, oh, like, what? Like, and you know, but
didn't he, like, convert a few of them? Like,
yeah, he talks about some of the stories of, like, yeah, because again, it's breaking down those walls of, you know, the Jojo Rabbit of, like, oh, black people have horn or whatever it is, of, like, these beliefs. And again, like, you know, I don't anticipate that this video is going to get to a KKK person who is going to be like, oh, okay, like, yeah, Arthur's not so bad. These a black and a white person get along, so, like, it's fine. Maybe I'll change my mind. No, the black KKK Klansman was actually pretty close to here in Colorado Springs. But it was set in the 70s, I think. And it was based on true story. But he couldn't go as a black man and meet with the KKK.
Right,
but
right.
so that's why they had to have Adam Driver's character.
That's right. So you got it confused.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah.
I
so
do know who you're talking about though. The bigger guy.
Yeah.
Yep.
I can't think of his name either, but yeah, it's been some interesting stuff. So let's go back to your movie project and what you want to get kind of off the ground. So you want to tell the story of the Sundown.
I think the story of the Sundown has been done very well as an episode,
right,
like that. What I would like to do is begin to do, say, and it's going to be a project. It won't be something in a movie, like one movie at all. I think, if you will, it's almost like a cinematic universe, if you will, to watch so that we can tell the story of how our Black real life heroes are so entwined with each other, like Harriet and Frederick Douglass. They're a lot closer and more entwined than you think. Like Du Bois, Garvey, and Washington, they're way more entwined than you think. Or even Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, they're way more entwined. Matter of fact, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and the Black Panthers are way more entwined than you think. And again, this is the tactics of divide and conquer to make the world believe, make us believe, make history believe that these men were butting heads and were at each other's throats, which was the furthest from the truth. As a matter of fact, going through the philosophy of W.B. Du Bois, who insisted that Black people, people of color, can be just as smart and as capable and as educated as white people are. He achieved that. He earned a doctorate at Harvard, was the first African American to earn that doctorate, and proceeded to then push the creative and intellectual excellence and genius of Black America, which in turn spawned the Harlem Renaissance. While he was doing that, he had Booker T. Washington starting the Tuskegee Institute. And Booker T. Washington himself was saying that Black people are just as good at trade as anybody in the world. As a matter of fact, we should be basically monetizing our skill set as slaves. No one knew how to pick cotton like Black people. No one knew how to sew. No one knew how to repair shoes. No one knew how to lay track. No one knew how to farm like Black people. There should be no reason why we shouldn't create it as a trade and in turn earn wealth that way. Let's fast forward to today. Okay? Think about what Black person has a respectable, I'll put it in quotes, a trade that has gained them immense wealth to and then impart high levels of education and opportunity for.
You're talking about basketball?
Exactly. Basketball, football.
Yeah.
That is a path that Booker T. Washington granted. But that path also does what? Takes most of them through college, which gives them that college experience, which they in turn possibly pass down to their kids. That might not necessarily be as gifted as they are athletically, but now that person has all the resources to send their kids through education and realizing their dreams. So it's all happening all at the same time, right now as we speak.
Yeah, it's really interesting of like you're saying, the interwoven web, if you will. But yeah, I mean, over here comes Lexi. Over a long term, it is starting to, even out the playing field. And I believe it was a James Baldwin quote that I saw last year, actually, as everything was going crazy, as the world was burning a little more than usual, was that pretty much no white person in America would want to trade places with any Black person in America,
to this day.
To this day. I mean, again, like maybe somebody who's really low on the totem pole, and maybe they would switch with LeBron James. I don't know, just because he's got X amount of money. But still, the point being around the privilege, and again, being able to walk into an institute and have that, just whether it's hatred or fear, insecurity of just and you walk into that bank or whatever that setting is, or again, you're walking down the street, you might be a black guy in a business suit. People are still crossing the street because they're afraid of just black skin.
Right.
And again, a lot of that comes from, most of it comes from insecurity, ignorance around just not having that exposure. So that's one of my takeaways is, like, and as I was having some of these debates with these blatant racists, in the last year, I was just like, how many black people do you actually know?
Right.
Like, you're talking over here about George Floyd had this in his system and trying to justify all that situation. I'm like,
I mean, it makes you rub your head because let's just think about it. Let's just think about it. While we're talking about George Floyd having any type of opioid in his system, we was at the tail end or in the middle of what? An opioid crisis, right? And it's considered an opioid crisis because the majority of people dying from opioid overdoses and addiction are white people. And there's video after video after video of these cops coming in, like Captain America, performing CPR, getting medical assistance, making sure that these people come out of it alive, even with them knowing that they are overdosing on opioids. Now let's flash forward to George Floyd. If he's having an episode because he's consumed opioids, then why are we restraining him, handcuffing him, things like that? Why aren't we getting him medical assistance as soon as possible? If you want to say that he's having a medical event, then why wasn't he treated like any other human being as having a medical event?
Well, that was my response to some of the people trying to debate that point. I was like, if he was having a medical event, then maybe you should take your knee off the guy's neck and let him die from the medical event. Like, that's not what I'm rooting for.
Right.
But again, like, you just and a jury just found was a few last week, and did they do the sentencing yet?
No, not yet. But man, they did. The defense didn't help. They were like, oh, it was the fentanyl in his system.
I mean, how much?
It was the exhaust from the car.
Right. They didn't have a defense. Like,
oh my gosh.
And we'll see what the sentencing brings about.
I can't wait.
But yeah, at the end of the day, again, I was talking to some folks trying to defend this thing, and this, again, deep-rooted racism or what have you, of like, how can you justify somebody, one human being who's not does not have the right to kill another man? Like, again, I get sometimes, again, speaking to my sheriff in Lexi, what are you doing there? Speaking to my sheriff friend in Orange County and a few other police officers, and actually a football player from his year, Brooklyn Tech 2000, is a police officer, and he's very Republican. And I don't know, have you spoken to, what I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
Ahmed?
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah,
he hasn't been on our men's course. If you happen to see this, Artola, jump on there. I'm calling you out by name, but
come on, man.
But, and again, one of our coaches, Coach Johnson, works for NASA, no big deal. He is a black man from the South. And, he posts a lot about racial issues. And we see a lot of comments happening underneath. Artola's one to usually come in and defend the police. And like, that was a justified, kill, or that, he should have pulled his gun. And again, like, it was interesting having conversations with police officers about, again, because some people, and I even heard it on Bill Maher last week or whatever, of why couldn't they shoot them in the leg or whatever? And it's like,
they're not trained.
They're not trained to do that.
They're not trained to do that. It's center mass. And also what they're trained to do, because the idea isn't to protect and serve.
Right.
The idea as a police officer is to get home alive. They're training you mentally, to survive in this world, not to serve and protect. They're training you to survive. And so there's these training classes. I'm not sure if the police departments are paying for these things, but there's a training class out there that's that the police, probably on their own dime, go to defend themselves in the event that they are being attacked. And the big idea of this whole training class is that you have to act before you're acted upon. In other words, kill or be killed. Okay? Do not assume that this person is not trying to kill you. You have to go into a situation believing that they can kill you at the blink of an eye.
Yeah, and again,
you have to be ready.
When someone goes into their pocket to reach for something,
right,
they might be reaching for ID or whatever.
Right, but they could be reaching for guns.
So yeah, and again, like the stress and I can't even imagine what it's like being a police officer in those situations. And again, it is your life on the line every day. So
So let me do this, because I'm gonna color this, because this is why we believe that it's so racial. When a black guy's pulled over, they are asked questions, even for a tail light, traffic stop, whatever. What are you doing in this neighborhood? Where are you going? Is this your car? Are there any drugs or weapons in the car that I should know about? Why? And they repeat it to try to.
As you're telling the story, and unfortunately, heard this story way too many times. But it also, I think, Neil deGrasse Tyson actually tells a story like this, where he was going to a physicist conference, of like all doctorates and things like that. Anyway, but I didn't mean to cut in there.
Now check this out. Now you're very familiar with this, right? Because you've heard it before over and over again from black people, right? I watched a video of 2 officers that were killed in action, killed on duty by a white guy. The white guy had expired tags, and they were going to tow the car, and they were going to detain him. Okay, and they were trying to detain him. They were pulling out of the car. They gave him ample opportunities to get out of the car peacefully, and he refused. They were trying to pull him out of the car, which is justified, absolutely justified. He managed to reach under his seat, pull out a Glock, and he proceeded to end their lives. And his defense was he was terrified for his life. This is a white guy. When I watched the video, I watched it twice, or I maybe watched it 3 times. They never asked him where he was going. They never asked him if this was his car. They never asked him, are there any drugs or weapons in the car that I should be worried about? Never did. And I want to believe, and I'm saying it now, and I can offend everybody on the who's watching me. I want to believe they never asked him those questions because he was white. And essentially, in that moment, in that instance, it cost them their lives, because they saw the color of his skin and judged him completely differently than if he was another. Because every black person hears the same question over and over and over again, especially, are there any drugs or weapons in the car that I should know about? And they never asked him that. And I watched it again just to make sure they did ask, and he said no. They never asked him that. And he had a gun under his seat, and he used it on them. And then he shot them both. One was still alive. He deliberately aimed, and shot him in the head and killed him instantly, and then ran away. And his excuse, when they finally caught up to him, was that he was scared. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I would always point to a racist tint, if anything, because police officers also have discretion. We never can drive a car, and follow traffic laws to the letter. We always break some rules somewhere, somehow. We put our blinker on too late.
What was the recent killing?
Oh, they had that air freshener on the rear view,
which is a written law.
It's a written law.
But again, like, yeah, it's something crazy. I have one. I don't know if that's in Colorado, but I forgot what state they were in. But I think there's 5 states after that story came out. 5 states that do have that on the books.
The books.
If you can't have an air freshener hanging from your rear view mirror,
obstruction of
view. So that's what this person got pulled. And this was a black person got pulled over and shot.
So that always
led to. And that was that the one with the taser where she
thought it was a taser.
She thought it was the taser, and she shot him with a gun.
And again, tie into it. He, I think he was, or his mom was, connected to George Floyd somehow. So then you see how that connectivity. But again, we're breaking the law all the time. It's up to the police. They in their discretion to decide if they're going to even pull you over or not.
Right.
And usually, if it's a black person in the wrong neighborhood at the wrong time, they're going to pull them over. They're going to find a reason. The cop showed a group of students how much power you have. Pick a car, any car, and I bet you I can pull them over legally and with merit. And then if you follow them for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, he can pull them over for anything. And that's what happens. And so when cops say that just doing their job, there's that gray area of discretion. How many people get let off with a warning for traffic stops versus how many people get shot and killed for traffic stops? Things like that. Or DUIs. How many people in small towns that are mostly white, get a ride home?
Right.
How many times have you heard a white person, but the cop gave me a ride home. They just told me to, you know what I mean? And then, you know what I'm saying? So that's really these stories, and the color that we have to be clear about is that there is a notion of racism through and through. And in that particular story I just told you, that sense of, oh, he's one of us, he's safe, is what got him killed. Because if they were just doing their jobs, like they tell us they were doing their jobs, they would have asked the question, and they may have gotten the answer they needed to then protect themselves, call for backup, approach it differently. But they didn't.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I think we went deep enough on this one. I do to the original kind of movie concept. So I did want to, again, as much as we've gone down some energy paths, and it's tough topics to talk about, but again, that's that uncomfortable conversation that I think hopefully somebody can see and move them in some positive direction in the long run. But yeah, Orange Man, back to him, former president. He was trying to actually, and again, I'm sure, I have a feeling you follow the story. I might be prejudging that you follow the story. But he was trying to actually remove, like by federal mandate, a lot of different educational components of history, which seems a little crazy. And again, I don't know if the mainstream media was totally misrepresenting it. I did not look that deeply into it because I don't have kids in school. It sounded a little crazy to me. It sounded very, I'm going to say it, Naziist, propaganda, whatever, of like, oh, I don't want people teaching the Tulsa Massacre. Right. Because.
No, yeah, he was going, the Times magazine created a educational.
1619, the podcast?
Yeah.
1619, about the first boat that came over with the first slaves
and
from Africa.
Literally taking it and going from there and having that whole stream of thought put into our education. Why? Because the New York Times discovered that in the South, things were already being done. Right. So when we talk about history, Black people now in some history books are America's happy helpers. And it's implied that Black people came over voluntarily to help build America. Right. When that's categorically false. Right. And so the Times is like, no, let's talk about what really happened and why. Right. There's another plug, great story, a great documentary. It was on Amazon Prime. It's not there anymore, but it was about New York and how New York is so tied into American history. Slavery riots, race riots, Me Too, women's suffrage. New York was pretty much in the middle of it, even all the way up until 2001, after with 9/11. And they talk in detail how all the highways, the Bronx, was it the Bronx Parkway? Yeah, Bronx Turnpike was built through indigenous land, built through low class and Black homes. They, eminent domained it and just moved all these people. Central Park, native land, Black homes is Central Park and things like that. And they talk about it in detail. I thought it was very good, very well done. And the problem is people like Trump, said his name,
Sorry.
they hide under values.
Mm.
Values like these Christian values, like same-sex marriage and this, that, and the other.
Say God, guns, and gays
is right. And it's very simple, very distilled, something that people.
It's great marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Make America great again.
Yeah.
I'm like, sign me up. Wait a minute.
Right.
Wait, it sounds great. It was better than most people don't even know Joe Biden's campaign slogan. Do you even know it?
Build back better.
Build back better. Yeah. And
right.
and most people don't know it.
Right.
And not great.
It's not great. No.
I kind of like it because from a rehab standpoint too. Because when I'm talking to a human, which I tend to talk more humans than other things, or androids or robots or Alexas. But anyway, when I talk to a human, I say, I want to build you back better because you're broken.
Right.
And again, most people's bodies break down
right.
as they get older. So yeah, I like the term "build back better" for that sake.
Right.
For the country as a presidential slogan. I mean, he won, so that worked out. But yeah, not the most marketable slogan. Ooh. Lexi. Anyway, Lexi, I think, wanted me to end that rant.
What? No, it's not the most marketable slogan, but what is under it is the substance that we're striving for as fellow Americans. Unlike "Make America Great Again," which is like, where did that come from? One, to me.
Right.
Two, when you understand what their idea of great meant.
Well, that's the one thing. Anytime I would try to have a normal conversation with a Trump supporter, I said, well, when were we great? And again, we had this on the men's group thing of someone said it was like, yeah, in the 1950s, like that was after World War II, what have you. I'm like, oh, so when there were like colored bathrooms and
redlining, Jim Crow, again, women's rights. So, if you really look at the studies about how much women were suffering in their marriages, emotionally, spiritually, not spiritually, sexually,
all
mentally, physically, is that great? It's those things, right?
And to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, I think, and some people say, I think it was maybe was trying to say, oh, well, it actually has to do with 1880s and went down this very deep rabbit hole. And I'm like, I think you're or maybe it was Greg, but anyway, but yeah, the point is, and this is the big thing again, when it came down to, again, arguing about Trump, Orange Man is at the end of the day, the rhetoric, the energy in the country, every single day, the platform on Twitter, just everything in the news. He built off of this, like, I'm gonna rile stuff up. And again, I don't think it's debatable. And again, I talk to Trump supporters and I'm, they're like, yeah, he says some stuff that I don't agree with or whatever. I'm like, I need you to be more specific. And it's like, at the end of the day, again, it's there's just so much, and he likes playing that line. And again, some people say he's an idiot, and it's like, I think he knows exactly what he's doing.
I think
he knows how to push certain buttons. Yeah. And he knows which people he wants to, be on the side of, and how to say things like "Make America Great Again" that speaks to those, like, oh yeah, back when we were a Christian white country, right. And again, maybe that's oversimplifying it. I don't know, but to me,
I think it's perfectly simplified because that's how he thinks.
Yeah.
And again, it's as if I was to tell you, Bo, you have to do it this way. Because if you don't do it this way, right, your marriage is going to fail. Somebody's going to come in, steal your wife, take your dog and your house, and you're going to have nothing. And somehow the stakes were raised just enough to where you can say, as a supporter, I don't agree with everything he says, but he's going to damn sure give me this right, and make sure this happens because I believe in that,
right.
And as long as I get that, everything else, whatever else, exactly,
yeah.
And that's
he's just joking, or that's not my problem.
That's locker room. It's not my problem. As long as I get this, everything else is not my problem.
Right.
That's the danger of it,
right? And
then we end up in Naziville, which, by the way, has anybody ever seen Man in a High Castle?
Yeah, that's another phenomenal. And that was based on a Philip K. Dick book.
Mm-hmm. He's a genius, by the way.
Philip K. Dick or me for knowing that. Yeah, he's written some really cool books. Anyone's not familiar with him, he also wrote Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, right. Which is what
iRobot?
No, Blade Runner.
Okay, yeah, sorry, Blade Runner.
Blade Runner.
And then
iRobot was one of his other, and the 3 laws of that was Isaac Asimov. Sorry, now you got me going down the wrong path.
But he did whatever that concept for Minority Report was.
Okay.
Dick.
Philip K. Dick, yes. Yes, I think so. Yeah, he's had a lot of great work. Anyway, Man in the High Castle, for those not familiar, and I think it's still on Amazon. I don't know. I watched it a while ago, but basically told the story of if the Axis powers won the war. I was like, not the Allies. We were the Allies. We're the good guys. But if the Axis powers, the Germans, the Nazis, and the Japanese won the war, and so they split up America on the West Coast. Is the Japanese territory. Colorado, ironically, where we are now, was kind of the neutral territory, free, the last bastion of freedom.
Right.
And then on the East Coast, and the majority of the country there was all Nazi territory. So really interesting. I think at the end of the day, it was just super interesting from science fiction, what if standpoint. I having watched that series relatively recently, I will say they could have done a little better job of some of the storylines and things like that. But at the end of the day, again, really, really interesting stuff, and it keeps you on the edge of your seat. And again, I'll pick on my wife here, and again, she won't watch this, so that's okay. Are we over an hour already? Oh my! Just like that. I think I have a call I need to check in on, so we might wrap this up. Oh, maybe that means I shouldn't, tell the story about Ma. That's all right. I'm gonna. It is our 3-year wedding anniversary, so I will leave her out of it.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Anyway, any other major thing you wanted to include before we wrap it up?
Well, I will say this: I am the director ascendant of W.E.B. Du Bois, and I am talking with a director ascendant of Booker T. Washington, and we have been working together. We've had a podcast as well together, and it looks like, based on what we see now for today, that both men were onto something, and it'd be a joy to talk about that. Hey, thanks. It'd be a joy to talk about that with her, and so that's what's going on with me. This conversation for me is something I'm always passionate about. So it's not over for me. I don't know about Dr. Bo.
Yeah, no, I'm never touching on race again. It'll never come up in my life for sure.
But yeah, that's where I'm going. That's where I'm headed.
Very cool. No, I'm excited to see how that all goes, and yeah, I mean, again, this, as it is tricky as a white guy to as a white person, not just a white guy, to find our way in this conversation. But it is a conversation that I think needs to happen. I think, silence is violence somewhat. It is like defund the police. It has its meanings, and I think people interpret it maybe a little too extreme. So silence is violence does not mean that, in that Trump example of I'm just happy with my bank account, y'all can be racist over there. Versus, again, it is that conversation of what can I do? And if I can have this platform, and if whatever my numbers of viewers, if somebody watches it, and I've seen recently had another friend who's a physical therapist. He was a radio show host. He has a really popular physical therapist podcast, very well produced. One day I'll get better at producing, and he has segments, and his whole theme is about drinking, which we were drinking, by the way. But somebody he posted on Twitter the other day, why is your physical therapy podcast talking about racism? He's like, I hope you're happy because you just lost a listener, and everyone's like, okay, bye, enjoy, get out of here. But yeah, I mean, and that's the thing too. I will say from the last 4 years, maybe a silver lining is, that was an interesting thing of the whole thing of a lot of folks got somewhat exposed, if you want to call it that, of again, I about a lot of people in my phone book, some relatively close, some a little more distant, and again, I was able to clean my Facebook thing and be like, oh, okay, again, you're over here talking about George Floyd was on drugs. Okay, cool. Like you're not a person that I'm gonna connect with, and like that's just again a deal breaker for someone like me. And again, in terms of having conversations, like I said, it's something that I'm always open to. I know you're always open to. It is finding those people who hopefully we can maybe educate somewhat. And again, I do think that shows like the ones we're talking about in movies, hopefully slowly break down some of these things again. And it's fascinating for me for like people who went through the Holocaust or whose ancestors went through the Holocaust. So these are some of the most racist people against black people I've ever seen or met. Right. And I'm like, but yeah, it's like, do you not see the parallels? Like, it becomes like, it's not my problem kind of thing. Yeah. And again, I don't want to, overgeneralize, stereotype, because these are some of the slippery slopes that we're going down a little bit. But at the same time, I do think that, some of this stuff is just crazy. And again, I'm glad we solved racism here in this 1 hour chat. It's all done, folks. Sure. Let them know. Let them know. We'll see it on CNN. Dr. Bobo and Arthur McFarlane have solved racism. No. I'm charging by the hour, by the way. Oh man, if only, man. If only. But again, I appreciate you coming out. Yeah, absolutely. And we'll hopefully see some of those projects coming up. And unfortunately, this isn't something that I think is going away. I like to joke about the solving racism, but it's unfortunately, it's something that it's deep, it's nuanced. Again, these conversations hopefully move us forward somewhat. I'm sure we could talk for another hour. And there's tons of references, movies, shows that I think have laid out things in an interesting way. That again, that's what I'm supposed to learn from that. Like again, the Jojo Rabbit, like that was one of my biggest takeaways. Is like, oh yeah, like that's how they portrayed Jews to Germans, like, and the kids to German kids, and it's like the kids are like, oh yeah, and he meets a Jewish person, and Hitler knew if he could just get the kids, just that one generation, if he could just last long enough to get those kids to adulthood, everything else would have fell into place. Germany would have been Nazi Germany for generations and generations. And Man in the High Castle, again, like that really, it's probably one I would rewatch just because there was so much deep stuff. Like I was following the storyline, and again, obviously there's a lot of like potent stuff there. But one thing I do, and I don't know if you do this when I watch some of those shows, like I have to go find some of those podcasts that talk about it, break it down, or the YouTube videos. Unfortunately, Man in the High Castle, I don't think was popular enough to get a lot of those. Breakdown things are like Mr. Robot and Westworld or whatever. And so anyway, it's some interesting stuff there. But man, again, I hope we're moving in the right direction. I think we are, but we still got a long way to go as a country, as a world. Hopefully again we can keep breaking down some of these barriers with some of these little conversations. It's probably not even 1%. As I say, get 1% better. But, anyway, we're going to call it a night. Pretty late here. I'm going to kick this guy out of my house just because it's late. It's late. It's just because it's late. All right. We'll see you guys later. Peace.